We're going to discuss the last 3 nematodes in this section, and we're going to start with superfamily Trichuroidea, and we're going to start with the only parasite in this category called Trichuris. Trichuris is commonly known as the whipworm. The adults are small and shaped like a whip. You have a thin anterior end where the scolex attaches to the intestinal wall of the host, and the stout posterior end or thick posterior end, just like a whip. You can find the adults in the cecum and the colon of the host. The eggs are a lemon-shaped egg, and they have what we call bipolar plugs. And so bipolar means at each end of the egg there are these protruding plugs, and they make it very easy to identify this egg. And of course there is a single cell within the egg. The definitive host of Trichuris includes pigs, dogs, ruminants, and humans. There is no intermediate host, and the prepatent period is approximately 3 months. Now for the life cycle of Trichuris, I'm going to let you read through this. Again, it's pretty straightforward like the other life cycles that we've gone through already. So just make sure you know generally how this life cycle of the whipworm works. So pathogenesis, only heavy infections are really going to cause a problem. So for instance, in a heavy infection, you might have fetid mucoid diarrhea. Feta means pungent, nasty smell, basically. So fetid mucoid diarrhea that may contain blood. You may also see the animal have a rectal prolapse. And if you're not sure what that is, I'm just going to let you look that up. And again, if you have questions on this, please let me know in class. Now for swine, the pathogenesis can be a little bit more severe, which I've experienced on my farm with my pigs. They can get diarrhea, dehydrated, they can experience anorexia, and it can actually cause unthriftiness and actually retard their growth altogether. So the next parasite we're going to discuss is from the superfamily Oxyuroidea, and the actual parasite name is Oxyuris equi, commonly known as the horse pinworm. The adult horse pinworm, the mature females, they have long, narrow tails, and you're going to find the adults in the cecum, large colon, and rectum. That is where they reside. Now the eggs are elongate. Elongate meaning kind of long. They are flattened on one side. So this is a micrograph picture of the horse pinworm egg, and it is flattened on one side. When you're looking at it under a microscope, you may actually notice that as a line down the center, and this is indicative of the egg being on its side, and it's kind of showing this flattened appearance. That's what that line is, as well as the larva inside. You might see a little bit of larva inside the egg as well. Now, these eggs are operculated, meaning they have a little lid up on the end of them, and this is where the larva will exit the egg. The eggs are found around the perianal region of the horse, around the anus. So this is a picture of a fecal exam. We were looking at it under a microscope, and you can see there are lots of ova in this picture, including one here. This is a strongyle. This is also a strongyle egg. This one here is a roundworm egg known as Parascaris equorum. It's a large roundworm of horses. But here, where these arrows are pointing in the picture, this is our elongate egg. And you can see this line down the center, and this is going to be our horse pinworm egg. So our definitive host, the horse, there is no intermediate host, and the prepatent period for this parasite is about 5 months. Now the difference between this life cycle and other parasites' life cycles are that the females will travel to the anus to lay eggs around the perianal skin. The eggs are going to be rubbed off by the horse rubbing its bottom on a fence or a building structure or a tree. So the eggs are rubbed off, fall on the ground, and become infective. The infective eggs are then ingested by the DH while they're grazing, and the eggs hatch in the small intestine, pass to the cecum, feed on mucosa, and then eventually they do become adults, heading down to the cecum, the colon, and the rectum area. The adults actually don't attach, but they do scavenge what comes through the intestine. The larva for pathogenesis can cause inflammation of the cecal and colonic mucosa. It can also cause pruritus ani, meaning itchy butt, caused by the eggs on the perianal region of the horse, hence the rubbing of the bottom on the trees and structures. We usually use something called the Scotch tape technique to diagnose this parasite, make sure that those eggs around the anus are actually pinworm eggs, and we'll learn how to do this in lab. The last parasite that we need to discuss is from the superfamily Filaroidea, and we're going to discuss Dirofilaria immitis. This is one of the most important parasites you're going to have to know for in practice so that you can educate your clients appropriately and also impress your employer. So Dirofilaria immitis is commonly known as heartworm. The adults of heartworm are long, slender, and white with pointed anterior ends. They can be up to a foot in length, particularly the females. The male has a coiled tail, as you can see here in this picture. The pulmonary arteries and the right ventricle of the heart are where the adults usually reside. Microfilaria is the first larval stage of heartworm, and you can find microfilaria in the blood. The larvae, the subsequent larvae that infect the body, are found in the muscles and the subcutaneous tissues. Dirofilaria immitis will infect the dog, cat, human, and many other mammals as well. There is an intermediate host for Dirofilaria immitis, and it is the mosquito. This parasite cannot complete its life cycle without being taken in by the mosquito, where the parasite can mature into its proper larval stage before being injected back into an uninfected mammal. The prepatent period for Dirofilaria immitis is 6 to 9 months, which is why when an animal is young, we usually can't test them until about 6 months of age so that we can see whether or not they do have heartworm at that point, or if we can put them on preventative medications at that point. Now for the life cycle, the mosquito will bite an infected animal, take up the microfilaria, or that L1 larval stage that's roaming around in the bloodstream. The mosquito takes up that blood with microfilaria. The larva develops into infective L3 in the body of the mosquito, migrates to the head. When the mosquito takes its next meal, the L3 leaves through the mouth parts of the mosquito and enters the DH's bite wound. Those L3 will develop to the next larval stage in the skin and then travel to the subcutaneous tissues of abdominal and thoracic muscles. Those L4 molt to L5, migrate to the pulmonary arteries, and they mature to adults and remain in the pulmonary arteries, and sometimes they spill over into the right side of the heart in heavy infections. But mostly, these worms like to stay in the pulmonary arteries. Females are fertilized after 120 days of infection, and microfilaria are usually seen 2 to 3 weeks later in the blood. What's really interesting is that female heartworm can produce microfilaria for 5+ years. They have a lifespan of 5+ years, and microfilaria can survive in blood for 2.5 years if it goes undetected. Here's a visual aid of the life cycle for you, a little bit simpler. So pathogenesis. Obviously, heartworm can cause a lot of problems. I'm going to let you look through this, and if you need to look anything up on your own, I encourage you to do so. So mainly pulmonary hypertension, right-sided heart failure. We have embolisms, which are moving blood clots of the finer arterial branches. Caval syndrome, obstruction of the capillaries, the very tiny, small blood vessels. Those can become obstructed by microfilaria. Right ventricular enlargement, causing a disease called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Eosinophilia, we have discussed eosinophils, which are the type of white blood cells we may see in the blood with parasite and allergies. Chronic venous congestion, which is backing up of blood in the veins, hepatic congestion and disease of the liver, also named cirrhosis, and ascites. And then DIC is also another problem that can occur from heartworm. Diagnosing heartworm, we have ELISA tests, which are SNAP tests, witness tests, well tests. We can take blood from the animal and make a blood smear, which you will learn how to do later on in the semester. And a blood smear will reveal the microfilaria in the blood. So we can actually see larvae roaming around here in between red blood cells. Symptoms of an animal that may have heartworm. They're easily fatigued. They cough, maybe sometimes with blood. They appear unthrifty, respiratory distress, enlarged heart on an X-ray film. Now compare the ova or the infective stage of the three parasites we just discussed. Trichuris, which is whipworm, Oxyuris equi, which is the horse pinworm, and Dirofilaria immitis, which is heartworm. Remember, the egg of Trichuris is lemon-shaped with bipolar plugs at each end. We have Oxyuris equi eggs, which are elongated. They are operculated, that lid up here that can pop open and let out the larval stage. It also has a line through it, kind of indicating the flattened side of the egg. And then for Dirofilaria immitis, we have multiple ways that we can diagnose this. But one of the main things to keep in mind, these two eggs from Trichuris and Oxyuris are found in feces. We never see Dirofilaria immitis or heartworm in the feces. It all takes place in the blood or some form of the body, but not in feces. There are no eggs released from heartworm in the feces. Everything takes place in the blood or in the subcutaneous tissues and muscles, or in the heart pulmonary arteries.